I'm sorry last week we didn't have Red Talk. There's been an outbreak of COVID on the Swindon Reservation, and out of respect for the community, the time for prayer and reflection and thought, we took last week off and paid respect and said our prayers for the healing of the community. When you say COVID, or you say an epidemic, or you say anything like that in those terms, you have a visceral reaction because the history of the tribe has been exposed to different kind of plagues before, and it's in recent memory, and so there's a traumatic memory that instantly happens when it hits the community. It becomes very vivid and very real, and the stories that the grandmas tell and the grandpas tell come to life again in a very bad way. So tonight we have Dr. Will and myself. We have Eva going to be joining us here soon, and Tony is indisposed tonight, and I'm sure he misses us. But you know what? We do miss his fire and excitement he brings to the table. And so tonight's topic is going to be 1,000 generations. And Deborah Halen, I think it is our new, Halen is it? Yeah, our new Interior Secretary, talks and refers to herself as the 35th generation. I think she's from Laguna Pueblo. I think it is. It could be Santa Clara. It's one of the Pueblos. A very honorable woman, and she brings a lot of culture and strength to the office. So I was thinking about her. She said 35 generations, and I'm thinking about, well, how long have we been here, you know? So this marks the 1,000th generation of our people to the Pacific Northwest and to the Skagit Valley. So a thousand generations ago, the first of our peoples arrived here in the area. So 1,000 generations. And you think back, what that means is when our people first arrived here, there was mastodon, mammoth, there was a cave bear, giant sloth, saber-toothed tigers. There were all sorts of creatures here that that we don't even know about today. That's the world they walked into. And so what is interesting is that they found a home here, and 1,000 generations later, we're still here, And so now I'm thinking about, as people have come and gone through the eons, and I say eons, and an eon means 1,000 years, so people have come and gone through the eons. And we know the Chinese have visited these shores. We know that the Polynesians have visited these areas. Later on, there was a huge impact by the Europeans when they visited the area for different reasons. And then there's also a lot of interaction between the different communities up and down the Pacific Northwest, all through from California all the way up to Alaska, visiting and sharing and marriages, intermarriages between tribes, and but we all had one thing in common with our religion, our beliefs. And it's a very simple, honest and pure belief. We don't go out looking for recruits. You never see an Indian walk and say, "Hey, you want to join our church?" We don't have that. You're already in our church. You're in the earth. You're in the earth here. So I was going to let Dr. Will have a little slant on that and see what he has to say about that. Every week the topic is it could be anything we want to. Next week we're going to have Spokanum from Lummi here. He's a violinist, and he'll be our guest speaker, a violinist, and he's a storyteller. So, Dr. Will?
Thank you, Jay. Sometimes when you look at a place, you sit quietly and take the time to see what's there and what's been there. And there was a time when this was always a densely populated area with people because of the abundance of nature, of the food. Most of our diet consisted of what we could find. You know, the tide goes out and
The table set.
table is set. You know. And there's a lot of food here, and that's referenced if you ever read or ever gone and looked at some of the speeches. The one that comes to mind is the famous speech from Chief Seattle that, you know, said we're just a shadow of our former selves or number at that time, because disease had already ravaged the population. You know, measles, something like measles, you know, an epidemic would kill all the children, and most of the people, whole villages would be wiped out. And there's things that aren't written in history books, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting because the first Europeans that showed up here, and I say Europeans, I'm not singling out Europeans in a derogative way, but the first Europeans that showed up here early on had a very difficult time coming to grips with the population of North America and the West Coast, and they realized real quickly that there was more people in North America than there were in Europe. There's all these stories about cities, bigger cities here than there were in Europe. Cities with 40, 50, 100,000 people in them, you know. And so there was a huge population of people here, but the devastation, of course, talked about when the first Europeans brought their disease and maladies to the community. And the second or third trip that the Spanish took down the coast, Vancouver Island and inlets to Whidbey Island, right out here. You know, the Spanish were just right out here. Said they saw graveyards that were miles and miles and miles long. Whole villages had gone. But somehow we're still sustained here. You know, some of us, you know, our grandparents pulled it off.
Yeah. Yeah, it's awesome, the fact that now we're having the children are surviving. Mm-hmm. You know, even the generation just 100 years ago, a lot of children didn't survive. We have families that would have 10 children and have 1 or 2 survive, and now that actually is the challenge, because our children are in need of teaching. And in my lifetime, a lot of the time spent in community has continually gone down and decreased. You know, we still have some families that maintain their cultural teachings, and the biggest part of that is by the grandmothers and the grandfathers maintaining and bringing their families together to participate, and I'm thankful for that. But we have so many more children who don't have access to this oral tradition teachings, where you just listen, actively listen. We don't have time, or we don't take the time, or not, to listen. And when I say that, it makes me sad that's the way it is, because, and I didn't have a choice when I was younger. I would not have chosen to sit and listen. Nowadays, we ask our children what they want constantly. What do they want? What do you want to eat? I was never asked what I wanted to eat. You know, you ate what we had to eat at that time. Now we have more choices and less time to be able to just be
I
quiet.
haven't figured that out. My mom talked a lot about that. She grew up in the 30s, and she said, we had it right to begin with. Our people had it right. And she goes, and the natives, they love new stuff. New gadget, new this or that. The old people always be the first one to get a new gadget, you know. But she said, the more my mother bought things that helped save time in the kitchen, the more time she spent in the kitchen doing the same thing, the more complicated things got.
Well, if you look at our gatherings now, I remember a time when we'd have to, you were expected to go.
Yeah.
And, you know, now that expectation is not there. And you know, in order to get people to do something or to attend or to go, we have to have door prizes.
Mm-hmm.
And we used, actually the food was better because everybody brought something, and because you were bringing it for the community. And actually that is the piece of things that we need to preserve from the past, is our community identity. You know, we look to our identity as being a tribal member, recognized, federally recognized from the government. We let the government tell us who we are. And if you look at the cultural, the people who maintain the culture, they pay respect by showing up. They pay respect by participating. They pay respect by helping. And when they do that, that's community. Community is not what it can give you. It's what you can do to participate and offer from yourself what you can do.
My aunt was telling me stories. My aunt is Anglo. She married my uncle, William Washington, and his nickname was Oni. And that's another story, how you get nicknames in the tribe. Man, you gotta be careful about getting nicknames. You can get nicknames just like that. But Uncle Oni, he came back from the Second World War, married this beautiful young lady, and she just went everywhere with him in the community. And last week she stopped by to visit, and she told stories in the early 50s how they went up Sauk River and they went to a longhouse, and my aunt was there. Auntie was the matriarch of the family, so she said yes or no to everything event. And they were having about 25 people there who were singing. And they were going to bring out squidilish boards. And they're a rectangle board, that big, you know, 4 handholds on handholds on each side. And so they got there, and Auntie Elaine sat down. She goes, "Here I am, this little white girl, and all these gadgets, and they're all singing." And Auntie gave Uncle Oni permission to start singing. And he says, "Can I sing?" And she said, "Yes." So he started singing, and they put the board in front of him on the ground, and he put his hands above the board. And she said, I watched that board rise off the ground into his hands. He grabbed the board like that, and then the people surrounded the board, and that board brought them all the way around the room. And it touched people as it went around. They would touch people with it. The board would touch people. It's for healing. And she said, all this time I'm thinking, what am I doing here? I'm this little white woman, and I'm watching these phenomenal things, you know. And I said, well, Auntie, I said, first of all, those people that were there came from a time when you came into the community, you were part of the community. You were no longer the little white woman. You were now Skagit. You were with Uncle Oni, and you had agreed to live in this community. You became Skagit, and they were able to accept you as a Skagit. So you keep on referring to yourself to this little white woman. They don't see that. They just saw another Skagit. And that was the last of the days when the community was recognized as being, it takes all the people from the outside to make this community a community, you know. And later on we're identified by enrollment numbers and so on and so forth. But she was accepted as a Skagit member. And she got to witness these really private events and private things. The singing was a big thing, you know. The medicine was a big thing.
That point about we survive and will survive as long as we remember and participate and build our community.
Yeah.
You know, I must recognize Swinomish tribal member, but when they formed the government, they formed, it's called the Swinomish Indian Tribal Community. And we still today will adopt people who have no descendancy from Swinomish. In fact, probably most of the tribal members at Swinomish are not actually of Swinomish descent. Firstly, it's a concentration area for the natives from the Samish, the Kikialis, the Lower Skagit, and the Swinomish. You know, and the reality is that before the Dawes Act, before 1935, there was only a community, and everybody's related. We're related, you know, all over the place. And initially, when they started giving enrollment numbers, there'd be people enrolled in multiple tribes because they're descended from multiple their ancestors. We were all traded, we all fished together, and we're all related. And we recognize when I go to Lummi, I'm recognized from my family in Lummi as being family.
Yeah.
And as a part of that community. In fact, you know, the smokehouse I participate in is in Lummi because of my family, because of where I come from.
A lot of people don't know what smokehouse means.
Well, the traditional place in the winter, because the people would, in this time of year, would move to where the food source was, you know. So you had people who would spend time in the mountains, and then they'd also spend time in the San Juan Islands, and they move around depending, they would call it semi-nomadic, but when you're living with nature, you move to where the food
they
source
had homes
is.
upriver. Our people had homes in Rockport, and we also had homes on the beach.
Yeah, and the people would get in their canoes and have tule mats, and wherever they pulled up on shore, where they went to their clam digging grounds or their gathering grounds, they put up their shelter.
Yeah.
And one of the big things that happened was the natives got concentrated in one area and unable to leave or go anywhere, and they weren't the usual way of doing things. If you stay in one place, if you're camping and you stay in one place for a week or two, and then you move to another place, you don't need indoor plumbing. You don't, and when you utilize every piece of the animal, you don't need garbage. You don't need a dump, because when you leave it, it'll clean it. When you come back, it'll clean itself. Just like in that way. But then when you have to spend time in one place, and you've never done that before, you don't know how to do that. And that even today, when you go onto the Indian reservation, it looks different. Nobody, I think we're getting better, but you don't see, people don't, they're accustomed to it. Like one time I went to the barber shop in La Conner, and Dick Holt cuts hair. And he goes, well, I asked your dad, I said, how come on the reservation you're it looks different, it looks like a mess. And what he said was, the things you care about are not the things we care about, and it's just this little subtle differences. But back to the community, whatever anybody can do to participate in community, you will earn your place. And again, the blood quantum and the tribal membership, and us fighting in court with our relatives from other reservations is divisive. It's what divides us.
Yeah, I don't see any of the things you and I brought up about how the spirituality that's the foundation of my life. I do it in my work, in my conversation. That's the true fruit of our existence, is our expression of spirituality. And that, I think, has been saved through 1,000 generations and has been nurtured and kept alive.
Well, it's quite simple. I think, we're connected. Every piece of creation, everything that was created has a piece of the Creator in there, and therefore it has a spirit. It has the spirit of creation in it. Like you look at Jay's artwork here, when he creates that, a part of that creation that is in him is imprinted onto his artwork. A piece of Jay goes in there into that creation, and that's the same with all of creation,
I think one thing, a young lady came by, and she wanted me to help her and give her instructions on how to play the recorder. Technically, she could play it really good. She could play each note like this, just read music, brought her a little stand over, reading music, playing, and I realized that there was something missing there. And I see everything from a native point of view. I said, where's the spirit? Where's her heart? Where's that? She's just copying the music and playing it. So I said, okay, this is all good and well. You're doing really good, but no. I said, where did this man who wrote this music, what was he thinking in his heart? And he poured it out on this music, and that's the expression. He could see with his heart. That's something fundamental about all the native community across North and South America. We see with our heart, and that translates to not to only seeing, but seeing, doing, feeling. The heart can see through multiple dimensions, and give you reasons to see and do things, and let your body express things, and let the old people come through you also. It's seen. It's a very encompassing thing. So I said, you have to experience it yourself. Let your heart and your see it through this, and then let the music come out and do an interpretation of your expression of that man's music.
When we say the heart, that it's a representation of our connection of creation, or the great mystery, or the Creator, God.
And 1,000 generations too.
So when you connect and channel, when you realize God, when you realize creation, that you're a part of creation, and when you're connected, when you allow yourself to realize that connection, it becomes a muse. It becomes everything. You're connected, and then when you speak, like in the way we're speaking, we didn't write this down.
Yeah.
We didn't write. All we're doing is connecting, and when you're connected to creation, you're connected to all of it through time. So the combined, you have access to the combined knowledge of your ancestors, that it builds. We stand on the shoulders of our ancestors through that connection, and it's something you can allow to flow out of you, whether you're talking, whether you're dancing, whether you're expressing artwork. And they say when you walk that road, that good red road, when you live your life connected to creation, it's everything you do is a prayer. We have these words to express these things, and people take them and they manipulate them. And all I'm doing right now is working to let the Spirit move my mouth to bring forward some words that, and it all is very basic. We are all connected. So we're all connected to creation.
What do you say to the people that we grew up with here, and in the non-Indian community? They have a whole different experience that they've never seen anywhere. What we're talking about, they grow up. Their grandfather moved here. They got a farm. They worked dairy. They grew this or that. Totally estranged from a very intimate experience we talk about. How do we talk to them that you're connected, whether you realize it or not?
Well,
to the fabric we're talking about.
People deny the connection and say they're free when they're disconnected. Mm-hmm. We have a responsibility to be connected. It is a responsibility. It's a responsibility to take care of everything and to know what you're doing. Like when you take an animal, mm-hmm. that it's a horrible thing. But this life is a struggle, and we need to eat to survive. But you should be thankful and be respectful of that animal or that plant. When you go and harvest cedar, you thank the gift that is being given, and you feel remorse. When you can kill without feeling in remorse, when you can do things and think that you are separate and that you are not connected, and when you're disconnected, there's a hole in your heart that you try to fill with things, Well,
the question is, I think one of the realities is, and I say this on different posts, yes, we are our sisters and brothers' keeper. I think that's something that ties us together as a culture. Is we do feel a responsibility to the members in our community, and as being here today, we feel an obligation to reach outside of our community to share these things with our new community.
Well, all people, everybody's in